Hey everybody, welcome to Lawn Therapy. I'm Justin Bird with Purple Care and I'll be your host. And today I've got Jim Huston here. Jim is a business consultant. I thought he'd be an excellent choice for just kind of like politically and the economy and kind of the feel of the United States right now. And I know that you go back and forth between 45 different states where you've got clients.
Sure.
And I'd kind of like to do like a state of the economy, like through the eyes of a business consultant. And we got to kind of throw in some lawn and landscape language in there too and see how it all applies.
We will do that.
How you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's been a great day and glad to be here. Thanks
Yes.
for having me.
I'm happy to. I'm happy to. It's kind of cool. Last time I saw you, we were tracking down an elk. You shot the largest cow elk that I've ever seen in my life.
I was
in
glad
Colorado.
you were there to help me get it down the hill.
Yeah,
So, maybe you weren't maybe so happy about that.
I was
but
not as
was.
happy as you were. No, that thing was a massive animal, and elk meat is by far my favorite meat to eat. I am a big fan of it. So, but love Colorado. You're in the Grand Lake area, and
Correct.
just absolute gorgeous area.
It's a recreational paradise. It
is.
really is. It's a fantastic place to live, and I just love being there.
Yeah. You know, what was the beetle that went through Colorado
Pine
and just
beetle.
destroyed? What was it?
Probably the early 1990s, the pine beetle, and I believe it came to the U.S. via some freighters in the wood pallets or whatever, and from Asia, and it infested the pine trees, the lodgepole pines, all throughout the northwest United States, killed millions of pine trees. Started in the early 90s and really got to critical mass probably in the mid to late 90s. And it wiped out probably 90% of the lodgepole pines in our area.
So what they do to what did they for pest control? Was there anything they could do? Was there nothing they could find that could stop them? Or
Initially, it was interesting. They were trying to isolate trees that had the pine beetle in them. And they maybe cut it down or whatever. And that worked for a while. But then they had a number of winters which were very warm, and because of that, they just went exponential. They just grew, and then it just got way beyond their ability to control it.
Yeah.
There was just no way they could stop it.
so I've walked through those woods. There's lodgepole pines that are fine, big, beautiful, and other ones. I mean, did they found where there's a strand that hopefully kicks off offspring that actually is going to be more resistant to that pine beetle? Because it was interesting how the majority of the forest was gone. It was very sad to see as a landscaper. It was truly really sad for me. I mean, I was almost kind of depressing looking through there, knowing that it would recover, right?
Sure.
And what's interesting about that is when it does recover, you actually get a lot more hardwoods. I mean, it's not so you actually get a much wider variety.
Correct.
When something burns
Yes.
back like that. So versus being all pine trees for miles and miles,
Right.
you have a kind of a nice diversity. That's one upside. But I noticed that some of the pines were fine, and so
A lot of the young pines were very resilient, and it was the older ones that seemed to be very vulnerable to the pine beetle, and so they basically eventually died. Pine beetle gets in there, and I guess the saliva from the pine beetle gets into the tree system and whatever, and kills it. But the young ones seem to come back pretty fast, and they were pretty resilient on that. But you're absolutely right. What happens a lot of times is that the aspen now have room to grow.
right.
And once they get going, they just go like crazy. And so the forest is more diverse. And it's just very interesting to see how the whole thing works.
Yeah.
Pretty fascinating
Yeah.
on that.
And then you guys got doubled down on because you guys had the pine beetle, so it killed, like you said, 90% of the lodgepole pines, and then you had all this tinder. It doesn't
Yes.
have to figure out too long what's going on, but then a fire came through and just wiped out the rest pretty much.
It did. In October of 2020, we had a fire come through. And this fire burned for weeks, but it wasn't progressing. It was just very, very slow. Then we had some westerly winds that came, which got up to 147 miles per hour.
Oh wow!
And and we thought there was a major north-south road, 2-lane road, and we figured it would never even pass that road. The fire. And then these winds kicked up, and it jumped the road, and the fire covered 9 miles in 90 minutes. 10 minutes per mile. I mean, you couldn't even outrun this fire. It was unbelievable. And I actually returned home the night before this happened, and I was evacuated about 8 o'clock at night. As I'm leaving, I'm looking west, and the whole sky is just aglow. It was just the eeriest feeling to see.
Right.
But then, like you were saying earlier, there was so much dead timber in the woods because of the pine beetle that the fuel was unbelievable.
Right.
And this fire was, I liken it. It's almost like a hurricane, but it's fire instead of water.
Right.
It's just blowing horizontal, and embers the size of softballs or even footballs just flying through the air. You can't outrun it, and there's no way to get away from it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, well, I'm going to get a garden hose and wet down my roof. And forget that. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
We were lucky. We only lost 2 people in the fire. We lost over 400 houses or buildings, and it just sort of devastated the area. But
Sure.
It was eerie. It was very eerie.
What are you seeing as far as, I know you work with a lot of landscape, you consult with a lot of businesses, but you also consult with a lot of landscape, and you made a good name for yourself there. What are you seeing in the landscape business, and how does that affect what I always say, Joe Public? How does it affect that average
Sure.
guy or gal out there?
A couple things. I think the landscape industry is very healthy. It's growing. And I think, the consumer is beginning to realize what you can do with your backyard, your home or whatever, outdoor kitchens, patios, pergolas, all this stuff. You can really create just a beautiful landscape in the back of your home, which is very refreshing, just a great place to go and relax. Think about life today. It's stressful. Just so many things going on. It's nice to come home to a place that is beautiful. It's plants, trees, shrubs, sort of just a garden experience. And I think a lot of people are really appreciating that. And so the industry is doing extremely well. There are a lot of good professional landscapers out there, and just a lot of opportunity, a lot of great products, whether it's a swimming pool, jacuzzi, whatever. There's just a lot of options for the consumer, and that's really exciting to see. But like I said, I think there are just a lot of landscapers out there, a lot of contractors doing some really great work. But not all of them are doing really great work.
Yeah, there's a big difference in land. You're going to have what we call in our world chucking a truck. Nothing, and we started that way too. So we were there too at one point. We had a couple of trucks, and that's it. And you're doing everything you can to just get your name out there. I've been there, and then you've got a true landscape, what I call a landscape professional, where they're professional installers.
Right.
Tell me maybe kind of the range there, and tell me the differences and what you're seeing out there.
It runs the whole gamut. I don't know how many landscapers there are in the country, but there are a lot. People talk about it being a very low entry point to get into.
Yeah.
And so, you got maybe a truck or a car or whatever, and a lawnmower, and well, now you're a landscaper.
Right.
And so many people start that way. The point is not to stay that way.
Right.
That's the trick. And, and this is where, because of the barrier to entry is so low, people aren't necessarily that well educated in business or even horticulture. And it's sort of, trial by fire and just sort of learn as you go, on-job training. And that's fine because, that's where a lot of us get our start. But the thing is that if you're a consumer, you want somebody who's, number one, is going to deliver the product or the service that you think you're going to get. And you want somebody who's reputable, professional, and has good pricing on that. There are a lot of chucks in a truck out there that, they just haven't gotten to the point where they're good business people on that as well. So you got to look. You got to be a smart consumer. You got to be an informed consumer. And to me, that's the trick, is to make sure you do your homework.
Let's talk about price.
Sure.
Is landscaping truly one of those things where you get what you pay for? Because there's some things that, that's not true. But in a lot of things in life, not all, but in a lot of things, you get what you pay for. And there's a wide variety of landscape pricing. I mean, it's interesting. I get to see other bids from my competition, and I'm even surprised sometimes by how little or how much people are charging. So,
Right. You know, what's interesting, my clients are rarely low price. Now, if they need to be in a competitive situation, they can, be competitive. That's usually in a commercial situation.
sure.
In a residential situation, I mean, I tell my clients, I say, listen, you want to have 2 or 3, maybe 4 other landscapers in your neck of the woods who have good professional standards and have good pricing. You want, 4 or 5 people that are going to reinforce your price, that it's a reasonable price, and then somebody comes along who's half your price or half, the group's price, and people think, man, I'm getting a bargain out of this. Well, believe me, if they're dramatically underpriced, they're going to have to cut corners.
Right.
They're going to have to cut corners. The quality is going to suffer, whether it's an irrigation system or whether it's a patio. That patio has a foundation underneath it. If it's done properly, it's going to last for a long, long time. If it isn't, it's not. Irrigation systems, I mean, you can use a variety of parts for an irrigation system. Good contractors using good quality parts, sort of commercial grade parts, really solid parts. And whereas you can go cheap, you can get a lot of plastic stuff that really doesn't last. And so if you're just going to shop for price, you're going to have a rough road.
Yeah,
You're going to have a rough road.
I agree.
So
I can think of minimally a dozen jobs that we've walked onto this year that we've had to complete where somebody else started, another landscaper started
yes,
it, and they literally just ran out of funds or stopped showing up. We heard that one. Or they actually tried to complete it, but completed it wrong because they just didn't quite have the knowledge to do it. They wanted to. I don't think they're necessarily bad people or evil people. Maybe they just didn't have the knowledge how to, create the things that we create. And they did their best. They thought they could. Customer asked for this, can you do it? And as a landscaper, sometimes it's hard to say no. I've learned that that's the best thing to say if you don't know what you're doing. Say,
Sure.
we do not do that. And people respect you for it. Like, I can do these things for you, but not that. And but as a new landscaper, there's a couple of times I know I said yes to things I shouldn't, because you want to do it for the customer.
Sure,
You want to make
absolutely.
them happy. You want them happy, and you want the business. But I see it a lot. But I can think of at least a dozen where, and some of these were large projects where they're $50,000 and $60,000 projects. And I remember one of them in particular was actually somebody in my neighborhood, and they didn't go with this, which I was kind of, at the time, I was pretty frustrated, and because I was like, man, that's my neighborhood, it's my backyard. And they went with somebody else. And of course, they went with somebody that was cheaper. And I would say about a month later, I kind of got that embarrassing phone. Hey, Justin, we're sorry. We didn't use you. And all of a sudden, we're finishing the job.
Yep.
And that was a pretty big size project. And they literally just stopped showing up because the landscaper ran out of money. He bid it wrong.
It happens all the time, and it's frustrating for me to see that happen as well. Everybody should be able to make money in this business or any business they're in. The thing is, you got to understand it, you got to price it right, and then you got to have a team that produces it right as well. And but it happens all the time that people underprice something, they get in there, they get over their head, and they don't have the integrity to stop and say, hey, listen, I got a problem here, and let's try to solve this thing. And then they disappear. I mean, it's just really, really sad. From a consumer's perspective, you want to, number one, be an informed consumer. I would say, talk to 2 or 3 or maybe 4 legitimate contractors. Get referrals. Talk to people that, can give them a good reference. Check out the references. You got to do your homework. Make sure they have insurances.
Yeah.
A lot of contractors basically want to fly under the radar screen. They don't have workers' comp insurance on their crews. Mm-hmm. So if a crew member gets hurt on your property, you, the homeowner, are responsible.
Yeah.
And so this is where, general liability insurance and so forth. I've had clients who have been in situations where, they hit a gas line, and next thing you know, you got a huge explosion on the property. Well, if they're not insured, guess who's that coming back to?
Yeah.
That's coming back on the homeowner. And so this is where, like I said, you got to do your homework. And so many people, and I tend to be a little cheap myself at times, But the thing is that I mean, I got to
Not
be
you,
careful.
Jim.
No, I got to be careful about that. But it's like I want to get a good deal. We all want to get a good deal. But the problem is, if we get something that looks a little bit too good to be true, it is. And so somebody's going to have to cut corners, and they're going to take it out on you, and you're not going to get the product or the service that you think you're getting. So I just tell people, do your homework, hire a professional, somebody has a great reputation, and you're going to pay a little more for it, but in the end, it's going to be worth it.
Great. Let's talk about, we're going to kind of switch gears, but let's talk about PE firms or private equity firms.
Yes.
I know that I know personally, and this is no exaggeration, but I get asked to sell my business probably minimally twice a week. I get an email, hey, we're interested. An email, a phone call, sometimes an email, a phone call, and a mail,
Yes.
an envelope. But it's crazy, and I'm seeing it all in several industries where private equity are just gobbling up businesses. Tell me more about that if you've seen that.
I have. In fact, what's interesting, a lot of my clients are at the age where they want to retire or make a life change or whatever. And private equity has really provided some great options for somebody who has a successful business. And so this is where however, I just tell my clients, I say, listen, this private equity option is something that we don't really know that much about if you're not involved in it on a day-to-day basis. And so we're busy trying to run our operations, trying to maximize our profitability, build our team, build the systems in our company. And we really don't know a lot about what we're going to do with this business once we decide to get out of it and to do something with it. I find that most people, basically, they want 4 reasons why they want to get out of their business. One is it's age, it's time to retire and move on. Number 2, health reasons. I've had a number of people that have had cancer or some sort of health reason, they're forced to sell their business. The third reason is it's a person who may be in their 30s or 40s, and they're just not ready to be a business owner. They're burned out, they're fried, and they're just not ready to run a business with all the complexity and all the things that have to happen. The fourth reason is that they get a deal that's too good to turn down.
Right.
On here. And so this is where I've had a number of clients who have great companies, and they just decided that it was time for them to make a transition. Now, some of them basically brought in private equity not to sell out the whole business, but to have a partner where the partner was going to fund the business and help them to grow to the next level. I had a client in the Boston area who was doing about $18 million in sales, a landscaper, great company, and he basically couldn't grow anymore because he needed capital to grow.
Right. Yeah.
And so private equity came in and would provide him with a great opportunity to grow his company, do some things that he wanted to do, and so that was great. He eventually got out of the business, and a couple of years later, but then I had another client down in the Carolinas who basically brought in private equity. They invested in his business, and but he stayed on as an owner, a CEO, and so they provided the capital for growth, for improving equipment, facilities, and all this sort of thing. And they have more than quadrupled the size of that business. A lot of it was through organic growth, which was neat to see. But then they also, the private equity folks, provided capital for going out and purchasing some other companies.
Right.
Really exciting to see. And so this is where the other exciting development in the landscape industry, all the private equity deals in the past used to be with commercial firms, commercial landscape maintenance firms, basically doing all the maintenance around HOAs, commercial buildings, that type of thing. Well, about 2 years ago, private equity started getting involved in the residential market. Companies that were doing residential services, very similar to a lot of what you're doing with the lawn care, pest control, landscape installation, lawn maintenance, mowing, that type of thing.
Sure.
And so it's provided a huge opportunity for contractors who are mostly working with homeowners on that. And that is exciting. And this is where a bunch of my clients, now the opportunity is to, okay, now we can develop a strategy that we're going to work in the business another 5, 10, 15 years, but we're growing that business in such a way that we can maximize, the end game strategy, if you will, when we decide to get out of it. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in private equity. And, it's the other thing that's happening is that private equity used to be for the big guys.
Right.
You really didn't hear that much about it for the smaller contractor under $5 million or even $1 million in sales. And so now that's totally changed the landscape, to use that term.
Right.
But it's really changed everything as far as how we approach our business. I tell people, I think about it. Let's say that you decide to go out and buy a McDonald's franchise. Okay. Well, I don't know how much you're going to pay for it, $1-2 million, whatever that number is. Well, let's say you have it for 20, 30 years. It's time to retire. What are you going to do? Put chains around the doors, lock it up, let the weeds grow in the parking lot, and so on? No. From day one, you have an exit strategy. And when you're ready to sell this thing, you're going to sell it for probably a lot more than you paid for it. And so it's an investment. It's not just a job. And so this is where that mentality really never crept into the landscape industry until recently.
Right.
And this is where the private equity component has really provided a lot more options. It's professionalized the services and so forth. And it's exciting to see what clients can do. I had a client not too long ago was doing about $9 million in sales. It was all residential.
Yeah.
About half of it was new construction, some gorgeous projects. About half of it was services to residential homeowners. Mm-hmm. And, mowing, lawn maintenance, pesticide control, all those sort of things. And doing about $9 million, he got over $12 million for his business.
Nice.
It was really neat to see. He basically got equity capital, generational capital for his family. And this individual worked hard, he and his wife worked hard building this business. It was really neat to see them, really take advantage of what they could do and really change their life for not just them, but for their kids down the road. It was really exciting to see. So there's a lot of good things happening with private equity, but you gotta do your homework. My clients are telling me all the time, like you were saying earlier, they're getting 1, 2, 3 calls a week or a letter in the mail about, selling the business. I get emails every day about selling my business, and it's like, I'm not going to sell my business in most cases. I mean, but the thing is that they're sending them to me. We talk about chucking a truck in the landscape industry. Well, now we get trucking a truck, trying to help you sell your business.
Right.
Now, these people are basically, what's interesting, I think, a lot of them are big into real estate. They're selling homes. Well, then what's the difference between selling a house and selling a business? How hard can it be? Mm-hmm. Well, if you're going to get involved in private equity, and if you have a business, I'd really encourage you to learn about this part of the business. But do your homework. There are a lot of companies promising big returns, and like I said, do your homework and talk to references and so forth. I had a client a number of years ago up in Northern California that wanted to exit the business, and they ended up paying a company $30,000 for them to do their evaluation and everything, and they told them, yeah, we have people wanting to buy your business. It was all lined up, and they thought it was a pretty sure thing. Never came about. Never sold the business. They were out $30,000. And so like I said, do your homework. I've got people I work with who I think are just very professional. They have a great reputation, but like I said, you got to be careful about getting into this. If something sounds like it's too good to be true, it probably is on there.
Yeah. I don't know how you feel about this, and I don't mean to ruffle anyone's feathers, but I've definitely met and dealt with private equity firms in my businesses, and I would say you got to meet with one of the partners, the guy that's
Yes.
got, the guy that's got control of the money or knows about the money. If you are the guys like you said that are nothing against the guys that are out there selling it,
Sure.
they're nothing against it. I mean, they're trying to make they're trying to make a living as well, and they may be representing a good product. But I found that if I'm meeting with a private equity firm, I need to be meeting with the partners. I need to
Yes.
meet because those are the guys. I need to get a feel for what type of decision makers they are and who they are. I want to make sure because that's the one that's going to be either investing in me or buying
Yes.
me.
Yes.
And again, I don't want them to. I want to find out what these people are like. See if they're intelligent. I mean, some of these private equity, it's not just money they're bringing in; they're bringing in some brain power.
They really
and,
are.
and they've got some.
really are.
And they've also. This may not be, as we say in Texas, I guess, or anywhere, but it's not their first rodeo. But they may have purchased another company just like you, and they know what it takes to take it to the next level or grow it. And so you're right. You got to do the proper research. But some of these guys are incredibly intelligent. I met with one here recently, just for kind of I was kind of curious. And the guy went to Harvard and then got his master's degree from Yale. Got his master's degree from Yale. So quite incredibly intelligent. Not that if you go to Harvard or Yale, that makes you guaranteed smart, but just to get in, you have to have the credentials to get in, and you got to score whatever it is, the 1600 on the SATs. And so, the guy's very intelligent. But just listen to him speak, you can see where he's made his money. He's very, very, very bright. And but having a guy like that on your board, or having a guy like that behind you, saying, "Hey, you should maybe think about this." Pretty impressive and very beneficial to the business.
Absolutely. And this is the other thing. What I find about successful contractors or entrepreneurs, they're doing four things. One is they're able to build a team. Number two, they're able to build and implement systems in their business. Number three, they network like crazy. And number four, they understand the role of a CEO. And a lot of people don't realize that. And part of building the team is not just building an internal team, but it's building an external team around you. You need a good attorney, a CPA. You need people like myself, consultants like that. You need educators. You need associations.
Did you just try to plug yourself in there? Did you just?
No, I didn't do that. That was not a crass commercial on my part. No way. No way. So but my number is anyway. But this is where that I think with building that team, so many people, and you get back to checking a truck, they isolate. It's just them, and it's like a couple people. The good professional contractors are out being involved in the community, getting around, meeting people and so forth, but they're building that team. So if a situation comes up, they have somebody to turn to who has expertise in a certain area. Could be an insurance agent, your banker, all these types of people that you need this team around you. And that separates, I think, the smart contractors, the entrepreneurs, from, just the people that are out there trying to, doing nothing but having a job, versus building a company, building a team, and so forth. Makes a lot of difference. And the PE people are a critical part of that team. And I think, like I said, you need to get out there, talk to them, and learn what's available. It's exciting. It really is. Yeah.
It is kind of exciting. I mean, these guys are. It is. I mean, it's. It's nice to be wanted, right? I mean, it's nice to be wanted, but once you get past that excitement, you have to make the right decision for your company.
Correct.
What I think is pretty interesting about you is that I know that if all the things you're saying today, whether you're a landscape, lawn care, pest control guy, this advice you're saying or giving is good for any business. And I know you're good. I know you've made a really good niche for yourself in lawn, landscape, and pest control. I mean, I see in magazines all the time. I mean, you're very well written. I think you write an article every month for Lawn and Landscape magazine.
I don't want to give myself another crass plug, but yes,
you should.
I have a column in Lawn and Landscape magazine every month called Travels with Jim.
Yeah.
So I get all over the country.
But I've seen you, and you've got articles all over. I mean, not just lawn. I mean, I've read articles from you. Like it's funny. I've been thumbing through maybe magazine, and there's an article with you on there, and so I'm like, hey, I'm gonna stop and read what Jim's saying. So I think that what a lot of people don't understand is that even though we talk a lot about landscape and lawn care and pest control on this show, the advice you're giving is good for any business almost. I mean, it really
is. I mean, basically, especially the trades, I work with excavators. I work with tile people, but primarily, I'd say 99% of my clients are in the green industry, either landscape contractors, irrigation contractors, or arborists, tree trimmers. And it's a great group of people to work with. But these principles work pretty much anywhere on there, and so this is where that it's exciting to work with people like that. And I was, as an example, I was recently, a couple of years ago, up in Boise, Idaho, and one of my clients had introduced me to a cigar and bourbon lounge. Okay, so anyway, hopefully there's
You
one
only
around.
went there once, right?
Only once,
once,
but I
right.
never left.
Right.
I never left. Anyway, so I'm back up there about a year later, and so I went to visit this lounge, and my client couldn't go with me. Great guy, and but he had a great landscape company in the area. In fact, everybody looked up to him because they had a very professional, a very well-run company. So anyway, so I go to the cigar bar, and I get a cigar, I get a glass of bourbon, I sit down beside this couple, and I'm talking to them, and so talking to the guy, and the inevitable question comes up, well, what do you do? So I asked him that. He said, well, I bought my father's excavation company 2 years ago. And interestingly enough, this individual and his wife knew my client and my client's wife. They went to church together, school together, whatever. So we got talking and everything, and finally he asked me, he said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm the guy that taught your friend, happens to be, his name is Hans. I said, I'm the guy who showed Hans how to price out all of his equipment, make sure all of his pricing was correct, make sure, show him how to format his financials, all that sort of stuff. And the excavator said to me, he said, man, I was just thinking about all that stuff. Well, and here's the question. I said, where did this individual get his pricing from? We got it from his father.
Of course.
Okay. And where did his dad get it from? Well, sort of by gosh, by golly, and whatever. So he didn't really have a system for coming up with this stuff. And as a result, this contractor wasn't quite sure of his pricing or how do you change things. And this is during COVID. And prices were just going through the roof. Labor is going through the roof. Things are changing an awful lot. And so he didn't really know how to adjust all this stuff. And I told him, I said, well, listen, talk to Hans. He knows me very well. Been working with him for over 10 years. If you're interested, I got extra time. I can come in and help you set all this up. And I said, but talk to Hans first so you know more about what I do and how I do it. Well, he calls me back the next day and he says, let's do it. So we got together. It was fun. It was different than I would normally do, but it was all about equipment, labor burden, overhead, profit, all this sort of stuff. So I got in there and did my thing, and he was already, this individual had some machines and dozers and scrapers and you name it out in the field. Some of these things cost $500,000, $750,000.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be nice to know that you're getting the customer to pay for that. And so anyway, so we put all these rates together, and he had about 8-9 guys in the field producing about 20,000 billable hours a year that he was selling to his clients. And so anyway, so a number of months later, I called him back, and after we did this, and I said to him, I said, Gabe, how much did we increase your prices per hour roughly? And he goes, well, it was about $30 an hour. Well, $30 an hour for 20,000 hours,
600,000.
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so now, and the thing is that, so he raised his prices, and I asked him, I said, well, did you get any pushback for raising those prices? He said, not really, nobody ever mentioned it. And I'm thinking, so what I do, I come in and I help contractors identify what their true costs are to provide a service or a product.
Right.
And so, and a lot of times people are underpriced and they don't know why. They don't know how to change it. Gabe turns around and he talks to me. He says, now I got a tax problem.
Right.
I said, that's a good problem to have.
Sure
I'm glad to hear it. But it's interesting that, we're out there working hard. And because people, like I said, the low barrier to entry into this industry, people don't always have the skill set to do some of the things I do and to analyze these costs and come up with accurate pricing. As a result, a lot of times they leave a lot of money on the table, or they just dramatically underprice or even overprice their work. In some cases, people have some real flaws in their pricing system. Some jobs they're overpricing, other jobs they're underpricing. Well, the problem is the jobs you overprice, the market's going to tell you, we don't want you.
Right.
You're not going to get those jobs. However, the jobs you underprice, those are the jobs you're probably going to get. And the more of those you get, the more money you lose.
Oh, yes, big time. What are some of the big pitfalls you think, or some of the reasons why businesses just don't make it in your mind? Like when you're out there, because I'm sure that people call you almost as desperation, like, hey, it's not like, hey, why don't you come and take a look at my business and let's make some improvements. It's more about, hey, I'm hurting and things are not going the way I want them to. So can you fix it?
To be a successful entrepreneur, I think you got to be more of a coach than a technician.
Sure.
It's good that you know the technical aspects of the business, but at the same time, I think it's important you understand the role of a coach. And you're able to build a team, you're able to encourage people, deal with the problems that people have, and not necessarily be upset by it. I have some people that they're great at the skill set of the business, but they don't like working with people.
Yes.
Well, if that's the case, don't go into business where you have to build a team of people around you on there. So that's, I think, a big issue is being able to build that team and understand leadership and management. Peter Drucker, great management consultant of the last century, he said something very, very important that I appreciate. He said that managers make sure things get done right. Leaders, on the other hand, make sure the right things get done. Managers are all about efficiency. And, they make sure that, the gears are oiled, the tires are inflated, whatever. They're making sure that everything is working smoothly. And they're working, making things efficient.
Right.
Whereas the leaders are making sure the right issues are being worked on, that the right things get done. Managers make sure that things get done right. This is where an effective entrepreneur, it's all about how you think. It really is. It's about how you approach the business, how you problem solve, how you build a team, how you build systems, and so forth. And so being a successful entrepreneur is really about thinking correctly, solving problems, just building that team. And I think those are a couple of big issues. The other thing is, I think, financial management. A lot of people get into trouble because they have all this cash flow coming in, and they think it belongs to them.
Right.
It's like, hey, this is my personal money. A client gives you a down payment on a landscape job, maybe $20,000, $30,000, and the person who gets it thinks, man, this is my money. I'm going to go out and buy a new car or whatever, and just have a great time. But they don't realize they got all these bills they got to pay. The margins in this business aren't necessarily huge. And so you got to run a tight ship. And so you have to understand financial management. Years ago, I was watching some people, and what was interesting is that when times are really, really good, people, contractors would go out and, they got great cash flow coming in. They would go out and they buy a big house. They buy big truck, big cars, boats. They'd buy all the toys and so forth. Well, the problem is that they were taking cash out of the business that they really needed to leave in the business. Mm-hmm. And so what would happen is that the next thing they find is that they have to take the down payment on a new job to pay off a job they did 6 months ago.
Right.
So they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. If you're doing that, you're going to get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And as soon as in a robust economy, you can sort of get away with that because you have cash flow coming and you can service that debt. What happens is you get in a recession, and you're no longer able to rob Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
Peter's disappeared, and so now you got all this stuff from the past that you have to pay, and you got problems. So those are some of the key things that I think business owners just don't understand. You got to understand and run a tight ship, and it's all about cash flow.
Yeah.
It's all about cash flow. Cash is king, and putting that money aside and making sure your projects are priced correctly, but also you have to have the financial discipline to make sure that you're just not out spending money willy-nilly and you're putting money aside, paying things off.
Yeah. That part about, assembling a good team, I think that's, huge for,
Yes.
some of I've owned a couple of different businesses, and success I've had is just, getting to find the right people, find people smarter than you or better than you in
Yes.
certain aspects. Like,
Critical.
I'm pretty good at what I do, but there's people that can absolutely do a better job at certain aspects of this job. Like maybe I'm, good at several things, but they're an absolute expert at this one thing. And if you can find those people and surround yourself, man, does that make you look good, and makes your life a lot easier. And they're happier. They love doing it. A lot of these people, the reason they're good at it is because they love doing it. They're so good at it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that part of, being a good business person is, checking that ego at the door a little bit, as they say, and finding better people and be willing to pay them as much or more than what you're,
Yes.
when I was growing this business, there were many people that made more money than I did, and I didn't care. It didn't bother me because
Sure.
I was driven to grow the business. I wasn't worried about the money coming in. It's important. I'm not going to try to
Sure.
say it's not important, but at the time I wasn't really worried about somebody making as much as me. Where I've had business owners like, well, we're not paying him that, or they make more money than we do, or hey, he makes more money than we do. I'm like, what does that have to do with it? I mean, I'm about growing the company, and I see that as a downfall, and I've seen it. And really, what it does is it's a big bottleneck. It creates a bottleneck because you're basically saying I'm not willing to hire more talented people than me, or hire talent, or I'm only willing to hire people at this level of talent, and therefore that's where you're going to get stuck. That's where you're going to stay. And I see it a lot. It's crazy. I've had people say it right to my face and mean it. I'm surprised by it every time I hear it.
Well, it's interesting because I've quite often run into clients who have an opportunity to hire somebody that's maybe once more than the norm for a certain position, but they have a great skill set. And so it's like, well, I'm not going to pay more than $25 for that position or whatever it is. But you think about it, if you hire a crew leader who's going to keep himself, herself busy with 2 or 3 other people, they're going to generate a lot of revenue. They're going to more than pay for themselves. But I get people that just don't want to invest in people because I'd never pay somebody that much money. But it's an investment if you get somebody with the right skill set on there. And so this is where I think a lot of people don't realize that. The other thing is, I really appreciate what you said, and Peter Drucker was talking about in his book, The Effective Executive. It's a classic book that I recommend everybody should get and read. But he talks about, hiring not just people that are smarter than you, but he also talks about the fact that we all have things that we do really well. But we also have things we do very poorly. And he said that the smart entrepreneurs, the smart people, are doing things that they're really good at, and they compensate for the things that they're really not good at. And so this is where you need to study yourself. You need to understand what you're good at, what you're not good at, and delegate the bad stuff, your bad suit, to somebody who does have the skill set to take care of it. And so that's where I think it's absolutely critical to be able to build that team and to compensate for the strengths and weaknesses of the team. So often, the problem is that we become the bottleneck in the company. I've known clients who, they get upset with people because they're not doing something as well as they could do it. And so they get frustrated. They tell the person, here, I'll just do it. Well, that's great if you only have one thing that you want to do.
Right.
But then next thing you know is like you got 5 or 6 people out there that you're trying to do their job as well as your job. Well, you can maybe handle one other person that maybe isn't quite up to speed. But when you got 5 or 6 or 10 of them, again, now you're building an adult daycare service, and now you're going to babysit all these people. So you, instead of doing your job, which is being an effective CEO, well, now you're trying to get everybody else to do their job, and or you're trying to do it. And next thing you know, you're overwhelmed. You become the bottleneck.
Right.
And so this is where it's really critical to step back from your business, maybe get some coaching or whatever, and to learn what you're really good at, what you're not really good at, and to compensate for the difference on that. Yes. Absolutely.
I agree. I agree. I think it's interesting that you're talking about paying somebody really well. There's little things especially in this business that I'll give you a very small example. We have masons that do all
Yes.
all of our hardscaping, and there's masons out there that will cost you but they are like artists.
Unbelievable.
The trowel in their hand is like a paintbrush. They're amazing, but it's also they've got it down to, ready for this pun, granular, because they even know how much sand they should add to the mortar mix. And if you don't have that exactly right, no one's ever going to know. No one's ever going to know how much sand you put in your mortar mix. But if you don't get it right, the wall or the whatever you're building is not going to be quite as strong.
Correct.
I'm not saying it's going to be weak, but it will not necessarily last as long. It may fade a little quicker. It may break down a little quicker. And you won't notice that until even 10 years down the road.
Sure.
You won't notice it, but it's worth paying those guys the money because you're really good masons, you're really good landscape installers. I mean, they know, the guys that know about the plants and where to put them, how to plant them.
Yes.
And a lot of people understand that as like, oh, I'm just digging a hole and sticking a plant in the
ground. How hard can it be?
We hear that like, well, it's, hey, what are you paying these guys $10 an hour? And they're just digging holes. I'm like, wow, there's so much more than that.
Absolutely.
And your best guys will see the mistakes they see, even maybe disease on plants. They know how to prune correctly before they plant it. There's just, like I said, the masons that know the exact right sand mortar mix. It's just, there's little tiny, and I can't tell you how many things are, even in irrigation, like, hey, just assembling, there's certain parts that we know are going to last longer, and the homeowner will never know that. They're just not going to know it. But we do. We know it, and the experts and the guys are really good at it. And again, you wouldn't know whether I used this kind of glue or this kind of glue inside the, when I'm gluing your pipes together. But I know which ones are going to work, which ones are going to fail sooner, and a lot of people don't. And I'm even surprised to hear a lot of professionals don't even know this stuff. They're just kind of doing it because, just like you said, maybe that's what my dad did. And that's what that guy did. And so I found that your best people are absolutely worth it that know all those things. But then again, that costs you more now that it increases your bid. And then people say, hey, why is your bid $1,000 more than this landscape company down the road? And I'm like, because we only hire professionals. We try to hire the very best.
Correct.
We train every year. We put them through training, and that costs money, but I'm trying to deliver the best product out there. So if you want the best service or the best product, that's what I'm trying to deliver. I'm not saying we're perfect every time.
Correct.
We make mistakes like anybody else, but
we all do.
Everybody does.
Everybody does, yeah.
But people that work with us, like if we do make a mistake and people are literally kind, genuine, and say, listen, I'm not overly happy. Can you figure out how to make this right? What can we do? I don't think this is quite the right way to do it. We'll work with them forever. We'll try to do our best to make everything. We'll go in the red trying to figure that out.
Absolutely. Think about it. Think about a really good chef. Mm-hmm. Okay. Chef has a way of putting, all the herbs and spices and the meats and everything together, and the vegetables and so forth. And they come out with some phenomenal entrees, just amazing stuff. You go to a great restaurant, and that's what they come out with. Compared to my cooking, and so this is where years ago I was a single parent. I had 3 teenage boys I was raising, and they suffered with my cooking for a long time. It's a miracle they survived, but they did, And so, but anyway, everybody can, I was using the same food that these chefs are probably using, but it didn't quite turn out the same.
Right.
I don't know why, but, it just didn't quite turn out that way. The good thing about all that is my sons, when I go to visit them, they won't let me get close to a kitchen. You know, Dad, no, you stay over here. We're going to go out to dinner. Okay, great. My favorite recipe is reservations.
Right.
Okay? But the thing is that, yeah, it's the same materials and stuff like that, but these professionals bring a certain expertise to the table, literally, in many cases, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to set ourselves apart, really be professional, understand all aspects of the business, so that we can give our customers, our clients, a great experience with our services, our products, and doing something very enduring, and leaving a legacy that's going to be around for years and years and years, and that's fantastic. That's not only a lot of fun, but at the same time, it's something that enhances the human experience. To surround yourself with beauty, with serenity, with peacefulness of a garden around you, that type of thing. And it really makes a lot of difference in your life, the quality of the life you're going to lead and so forth. And just having this type of an experience, this type of environment is priceless. It really is.
Yeah. I was sitting in an interview today. One of my sales managers said, "Hey, Justin, I've got a second interview. I'd like you to meet this individual." And so I did, of course. And one of the things that she said was, she said that I always ask, what makes you want to work here? Why would you want to be here?
Sure.
You got plenty of opportunities out there. Why here? And she said, actually, it's just when you come in and all the beautiful landscaping. And, sometimes I forget I don't forget because I drive by it every day, but sometimes I may even take it for granted.
Take it for granted. Exactly.
That people, they're like, this is, you have gorgeous landscape that we installed, but, because we want to kind of show off our wares, but I forget just how beautiful it is and how
absolutely
when people are used to working on maybe that concrete jungle, nothing against that. There's absolutely a place for that. But when they come to a place like this and there's beautiful landscaping around it, and she said, it's just relaxing, just looking out the windows.
Makes all the difference in the world.
And
it really does.
Yeah, so it was kind of neat to hear that. But I think that it's what we do. We're good at it, and I enjoy doing it. And I think that I'm very thankful that there's a consultant out there like you that can really help people do this, because we need more good landscapers. And here I am.
We do.
And I'm
Absolutely.
actually. You may go, wait a minute, Justin. Why do you want competition? We need more good landscapers out there.
Absolutely.
I need more good guys that are out there doing the right job on the lawn, that's better for the environment, that are making beautiful installs, because it makes me improve my game, because I've got to
absolutely.
And I want to get better. I want them to get better, and it also raises prices up if you have really good competition, and I'm okay with it. I'm not saying I'm always trying to charge the customer more, but when you raise prices, it actually creates better jobs. When you create better jobs, people can make a living versus making it's tough to live anymore on $30,000-$40,000 a year. I'm not saying those are bad incomes, but it's tougher to live. I think those are more survival incomes now, where if I'm talking live, you need to make more money. Well, if we can create an atmosphere where we can create more professionals that can make good money, we're going to attract the right people that are talented, that can now deliver a superior product and deliver better designs and guarantee better installs. That all happens with intelligence, and to recruit that intelligence, using if they follow the money. I'm not saying that everybody's out there trying to money, but if you want to hire an intelligent person, that person usually can garnish a larger wage than the person that's not. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what I've tried to do here, is increase the professionalism in our industry, because I want people going, I want to work there because they're a professional company. I think I can make good money, and we can bring in talent.
You can have a whole career there.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And with that talent, now I can deliver unbelievable services to my customers. And will it cost you a little more? Yeah. But will it be done right? Yes.
Absolutely. You can always go out and pay and buy cheap stuff, but it's not going to last. Mm-hmm. You can go out, you can take things on the cheap, and I liken it to, people want to have a cheap date. Mm-hmm. I don't want to date somebody who's the cheapest date out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, you sort of get what you pay for. Exactly. But this is where that I think, you usually get what you pay for.
Yep.
And this is where that I think, what's interesting, I think, is that recently I was on a panel discussion. In the panel discussion, the question came up is, what's going to be the biggest challenge of 2024? And I got thinking about it. I thought, well, labor has been a big issue. Is that the right topic to respond to? And then I think about, the rising prices and all this other thing and whatever. And finally, when it came my turn to speak, I got thinking about it, and I said, the biggest challenge in 2024 is going to be the same as the biggest challenge in 2022, 2019, 2025. The challenge is always going to be the same. The biggest challenge that we're all going to face in this industry this year is ourselves. we are our biggest competition. In fact, there's a Pogo, the cartoon Pogo, years ago, the clip came out, and it went along this line. It said, we have met the enemy, and the enemy is us. We are our biggest challenge. We need to learn to manage ourselves. And that's really what Drucker's talking about his book, The Effective Executives. Learning, you got to study yourself, learning about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, and so forth, what you do well, what you don't do well, and to really understand yourself and to improve your skill set on here. And so life it should be a continual learning experience of improving your skill set, improving your ability to work with people, to do different things, and so forth. And so this is where our biggest challenge, I think, it always gets back to us. What can I do more efficiently or more effectively? How can I be a more effective executive? How can I be a kinder person? What about patience? How can I be more patient, and a better leader on here? And to this end, I think it's really important for us to read and study the lives of effective leaders on that. And an interesting person that I read about not too long ago was Ulysses S. Grant. A very fascinating personality. And Grant, as a president, is now people are beginning to respect what he did a lot more than a number of years ago. People saw him as an alcoholic and so forth, and he was sort of ridiculed for that. But recently, I think there have been some authors who are really coming out and talking about his life and how effective he was as a general, but also how effective he was as a president. Well, but what was interesting when I read the book entitled Grant, of all things, what was interesting, he failed at almost everything he did.
He sure did.
Except being a general. And so what was early in his career in the Army, he was a phenomenal horseman, an amazing horseman. He graduated from West Point. And early on, he marries his childhood sweetheart. And but he gets stationed, I think, in Humboldt, California, 2,000 miles away from his wife. And there he almost fell apart. He was depressed. That's where he started heavily drinking. And it was interesting. I mean, it was something where you realize that alcoholism tends to be a sickness, and he just could not drink in these situations. And so the Army actually gave him a choice. They said, listen, you can either resign your commission or we're going to court-martial you. And so he resigned his commission, went back to the hometown where his wife was. I think it was in Kansas or Missouri. And he tried a number of things. He failed at being a farmer. He failed at being a businessman. He failed at numerous things. And in fact, he would enter into these partnerships where he'd get ripped off. It's like, how could you be this dumb? But anyway, he failed at everything. Fortunately for him, the Civil War came along, and he was called back up, and he was commanding. Well, he was started, I think, as a major. Quickly, he excelled to become a colonel and then a general, and he excelled on the battlefield. Grant was a phenomenal leader in that he could almost instantly analyze a battlefield, develop tactics, to deploy his troops and prevail in the battle. What was interesting at that time, George McClellan was in charge of the Federal Army under Lincoln, and he could not make a decision. I mean, he topped. I think he graduated number 2 in his class at West Point. He was, I think, an engineer by trade, and but he would get involved in endless analysis.
Right.
Endless. He could not make a decision. He wanted to get perfect data and complete data before he could make a decision. Even then, if he did have complete, perfect data, he still couldn't make a decision.
Paralysis by analysis.
Paralysis of analysis, absolutely. Lincoln was totally frustrated with this guy. He was snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And so, whereas Grant out in the Western Front, I mean, he was winning these battles and so forth because he wouldn't have all the information that he probably needed, but he could see the patterns and he could deploy his people effectively and prevail on the battlefield. And so it was amazing to study this guy's life. I mean, he was a terrible failure at so many things, but he was an amazing leader. He was able to lead people, analyze a battlefield, and he and Lincoln became really good friends. After the Civil War, Lincoln and Grant, neither one of them wanted to punish the South for what they had done. They wanted to restore it, to restore the Union.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, the night that Lincoln was shot, Grant was supposed to accompany him to Ford Theater. But for some reason, he had another obligation with his wife. He couldn't go. And he always really felt bad about that. But then later, when he became president, he was absolutely an amazing president. Unfortunately, after his presidency, I think it was the next president had to make a deal with the Southern politicians not to, Grant brought in martial law in the South, essentially.
Right.
And so was restoring civility down there and so forth. Well, what happened was his predecessor, and I forget who it was, but it might have been President Hayes, in order for him to get elected, he needed the support of the Southern politicians. To do that, he had to agree to remove the Union troops from the South, and what happened was it created a vacuum, and as a result, the next 100 years was run by Jim Crow law in the South. Terrible. It was terrible.
Terrible.
It was terrible. But Grant was an amazing president. He understood his limitations, and he had a lot of them, but he was an amazing person because he deployed himself into his strength, which is something that Drucker talks about a lot. He said, listen, don't focus on the problems, focus on the opportunities. Focus on what you do well. Yeah, we all have things we don't do well, but make sure you focus on what you do well and accelerate. That's how you're going to make a contribution.
Right. I agree. It's what you just said. I tell my kids, and I coach a lot of kids too in wrestling, and I tell them all, I'm like, everyone's got a superpower. The problem is, I think a lot of times people don't ever figure out what that is.
Yes.
Or they don't get an opportunity to even exercise that. But I mean, find out what your superpower is. I mean, I think everyone has it. I really believe that.
I agree.
Or the lion's share of us do. Find out what you're good at and go for that. I mean, it's not even just what you're good at. It's and I think in order to find it, you do have to fail. I mean, I always kind of jokingly tell my sons, I mean, I wasn't I was smart, but I wasn't the smartest. I was strong, like in athletics. I was fast, but I wasn't the fastest. I was strong, but I wasn't the strongest. And what I realized though is that I just didn't give up for nothing. Yes. And I also could outwork, so I could always outwork people. And so what I found, rather than complain like, I'm not as smart as that guy, or I'm not as strong as that guy, well, it'd be nice if I could run as fast as that guy. I didn't complain. I just I just saddled up to, I'm just going to have to, if he's running whatever, 5-10 sprints a week, I'm going to have to run 20.
Yes.
And if this person studies for 3 hours to get an A on the test, I'm going to have to study for 6. Is it fair? I was never interested in fair. I didn't care. I just wanted to win. I just wanted to be successful. I just wanted to win. And so what I learned, luckily, through failure, I'm not saying I'm as good as Grant, but through failure, I learned what I was good at, which was just tenacity.
Yes.
And my stick to it. And once I'm on something, I'm on it. And I stay with it, and I stay with it, and I stay with it. And sometimes long after I maybe shouldn't, but I just don't give up. But that can still be, The superpower is just having that tenacity of like, I'm going to stay here and get this done.
It is critical.
Yeah.
It's absolutely critical not to give up. And I used to tell my kids, I said, it takes about 20 years to become an overnight success. And that's so true.
Yeah.
And most people, they give up. And that was one of the traits in my life, is that I had all the reasons in the world to give up. I mean, my grandfather on my father's side died of acute alcoholism, who was gassed in World War I, died of alcoholism at the age of 29.
Imagine what that guy saw.
Oh, yeah.
World War
Oh, my
Trench War.
gosh, it was
Oh,
terrible.
my God.
My grandfather on my mother's side was a mobster
Oh, boy.
up in Springfield, Massachusetts, back in the 20s and 30s in the Prohibition period. His wife, my grandmother, was a flapper, Roaring Twenties dancer and so forth. And, I was going, man, not much of a heritage there, and so the trend doesn't look well. But anyway, but the thing is that I remember as a kid, I just refused to give up. It's the same things like you're talking about. And I just refused to stop, and it's like, okay, I'm going to try this. Don't make a bunch of excuses. And this is where that I was the first one in my family to go to college and probably graduate from high school almost and not become a mobster. And so this is where that, like I said, I think so much of life is about, just the attitude that we develop, this never say die attitude and not giving up. It's the American spirit.
Yeah.
It really is the American spirit, and it is so exciting to see the opportunities today are greater than they've ever been. For a young person who has their head screwed on straight, that willing to work hard, get out there and be creative, and help other people. Somebody once said, if to get what you want in life, help a bunch of other people get what they want in life.
Agreed.
It really is. And this is where if we develop that service attitude, and I think one of the big things I learned from my grandmother, who was a professional waitress, my mother was a professional waitress, and so forth, was this serving attitude that it isn't subservient to help other people and to help them, get along with life and whatever. And if you do that, the sky's the limit.
Okay.
It's what you do in your business all the time. It's, you're helping people to improve their properties, you're helping them to accomplish great goals in their lives. And as a result, you build a team. And even with your team out there, I think it's critical to, coach these people and to help them develop their skill set, to help them find out what they do extremely well, and encourage them to do it and help them along the way. And in other words, I think we are trying to create an environment where our clients flourish on that. And to flourish, I'm talking about flourishing in all aspects of your life. We should flourish as far as our home setting, and so forth. In our careers, we should flourish, financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically, we should flourish, and, by good, healthy habits, exercise, and that type of thing. So our first objective, I think, is to flourish personally. And then as leaders, we want to turn around and help other people to flourish. You're helping your clients flourish, your employees flourish, your family, your sons, your wife, and so forth. And so we're really in the flourishing business. That's what we're trying to do with life. That's what we're trying to do with our businesses. This is what we're trying to do with everything we do, with helping and coaching people. And I think everybody you see, every place you go, you want to leave that person or that place better than when you found it. Absolutely. I think that's a key principle of life.
Jim, thanks for being here today. You've been awesome. You're good. I think you're a great consultant, especially in our industry. But I like your stories just as much as I like your consulting to be, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. But thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Most of my stories are true. In fact, yeah, absolutely. But no, I really appreciate you having me, and it's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.